the 19th of January 2021. So I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I have a request to add agenda item number 8.5, a waiver of notice to consider the Municipality of Jasper Council writing a letter to Mr. Jason Kenney, Mr. Martin Long, and the Environment Minister, Mr. Jason Nixon, to show our discontent with any disruption to our Albertan mountain ranges, followed by agenda item number 8.6, that Council would ask to direct administration to write a letter on Council's behalf to the province about the irreparable destruction for coal mining in Alberta's Rockies. It's something that's changing each day, and with my research last night, the action that happened yesterday, I feel like if we could add to the momentum in the province by standing with the rest of Albertans in the duty to act. If there's any agreements on Council, I would like to add those items to today's agenda. I would also like to add agenda item number 10.1 under new business and outdoor skating surface in the Municipality of Jasper.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Anything from any other councillors? All right, so we could proceed with one motion to cover both of those changes, but if any councillor prefers, I can also separate the questions, which may or may not be appropriate in the circumstances. I don't want to position anybody. Let's deal with them separately, since I don't see any other hands coming up. With respect then to a motion to add to today's agenda as item 8.5, both a waiver of notice and a request that Council consider a motion to direct administration to write a letter to the Premier and the Government of Alberta concerning recent events to permit surface coal mining in areas that had previously been closed. Does that capture close enough your motion, Councillor McGrath? All right, so I have a motion then from Councillor McGrath to add that topic as agenda item 8.5. Any debate on that issue? You're ready for the question? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? There is one opposed. That is carried. And then with respect to new business, a different matter in any event, and you probably could have raised it in regardless, but you have raised it now, and I appreciate that. So a motion from Councillor McGrath to add as agenda item 10.1, a discussion concerning, I think, the provision of outdoor skating in the municipality. All right, any debates with respect to that motion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Are there any opposed? There is one opposed. That is carried. So might I have a motion then to approve the agenda as, I'm sorry, Councillor Butler?
I apologize for not being quicker on this. I do have an item I would like to add.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
To the agenda, I don't know where it would be, but at the end of the agenda, because my request would be that it be in closed session under human resources.
All right, so your request is to add an in-camera item,
as a human resources item.
right? And
So your discretion, your worship,
Right.
where you feel that should be of it.
I would suggest that we could slot it in after agenda item 12 and before agenda item 13. Maybe we'll call it 12A. And it would be subject to is it section 24 of the legislation.
That's correct. And if it's helpful, I can assure council there will be no business arising from that session necessitating coming back into a Zoom, public Zoom session.
All right, thank you. So I have then a motion from Councillor Butler that we add to today's agenda an item that I will call 12A, which will be an in-camera item dealing with a personnel or human resources issue subject to the necessary for legislation. Any discussion on that or debates? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So now might I ask for a motion that council approve the agenda for today's meeting as amended, and amended so as to include the addition of agenda item 8.5, 10.1, and 12A as we have just moved. All in favor, pardon me, a motion from Councillor Journeau. Thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. Thank you all. We have an agenda, a wonderful thing. The minutes of the regular meeting of January 5th, 2021 have been circulated. Are there any errors, corrections, omissions to be corrected in those minutes? If there are none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes as circulated, please? Councillor McGrath, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That motion is carried. We have as a standing item under presentations, agenda item 4.1, a verbal report from the Emergency Coordination Center. Mr. Hutton, your screen has come on, so I presume that that is yours.
Correct. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Just a quick update for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. Although the data presented here is current as of Sunday, January 17th, the last reporting period for the province. As standard, the ECC has been following a 7-day operational period, meeting once per week with any additional meetings scheduled as required. I think we can all agree Jasper has been quite a busy town over the past week, but the majority of visitors are adhering to provincial and municipal requirements, but the possibility for virus transmission into Jasper still remains. The case count and case numbers in Jasper has remained relatively stable. Excuse me. My computer screen just did a trick on me. There we are, back again. The situation in Jasper has remained relatively stable since last Tuesday. To date, Jasper has seen 183 total cases, 171 recovering cases. We are sitting at 7 active cases and no additional deaths, with the number still being at 5. Encouraging the Seton Healthcare Center and the Alpine Summit Seniors Lodge are no longer in outbreak status. Vaccinations in Jasper are continuing, although I don't have any data on the numbers of vaccinations delivered in Jasper. Provincially, there's been just under 90,000 vaccines given to phase 1 and phase 1A persons. Those would be vulnerable populations such as long-term care residents and frontline medical staff. On January 18th, some of the restrictions were modified by the province, outdoor gatherings were allowed up to a number of 10. Funerals, a number of attendees were increased to 20. And personal and wellness services were opened with appointment only. All other restrictions are to remain in place until further notice. Provincially, we can see some trending down of numbers as well. To date, been 112,000 total cases. Active cases are going down, hospitalizations are going down, so are ICU patients. But sadly, there was 140 deaths over the past week. And across the country, we are unfortunately seeing serious situations worsening in Ontario and Quebec with the addition of further restrictions and measures implemented in both those provinces. And to close, I'd say despite our local and provincial case numbers trending downward and some positive numbers there, it's not the time to relax our vigilance in any way. Everyone is encouraged to continue adhering to our current provincial restriction and monitor those for updates and changes. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. Any questions from councillors directed to Mr. Hutton or to administration generally about the ECC and that report? Councillor Journeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And not a question, just a comment. People are accepting more and more the fact that they have to wear protection and protect the public. I work in Marmot Basin, basically patrolling parking lots for that purpose. And we've had some very, very busy days up there. And people come for lunch, lots of tailgate type of adventures for barbecues and so on and so forth. And I have to admit, we've not had any problems. And I'm not aware that anybody at Marmot has had to ask people to wear masks. Yeah, there's some meetings and encounter, and I won't say encounters, but people will meet and maybe they didn't social distance without a mask. But generally, it's very good. I have to admit that I think the public's aware that we're probably going to have to be wearing masks for a long time, and that it's getting better. And I think that's one of the reasons the numbers are down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. All right, if there is nothing else for Mr. Hutton, I thank you again for your report this morning and compliment you on your apparel.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, is there any business arising from the minutes of January 5th, 2021? If not, agenda item 6 is department reports. There are none scheduled. I assume nothing has arisen. I see a shake of the head from Mr. Given. So I can move to agenda item 7, bylaws. 7.1 is a bylaw summary for information. And 7.2, we have before us for first and second reading, the supplementary assessment of improvements bylaw. Mr. Given, through you to whomever on staff you might wish to address the matter.
Sure, Ms. Nadon can speak to the details, but it is a requirement under the Act for Council to annually pass a supplementary assessment of improvements bylaw and a supplementary property tax bylaw. So there's a requirement if Council wishes to levy to assess any changes that are made during the course of the calendar year, or actually assign a tax to those changes. These bylaws are a requirement to enable that. So just a housekeeping matter, Your Worship and Council generally, but if you have any questions on the details, Christine can help you out with those.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion that we give first reading to bylaw number, whatever it might be? 223?
233, Your Worship, I believe is first.
Yeah. 233, so I'm sorry, yes, I misread. Councillor McGrath, I'm sorry, your hand is up to make that motion. All right, I have a motion from Councillor McGrath that council read for the first time bylaw number 233, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize the supplementary assessment of improvements for the taxation year 2021. I see no hands in debate. I will call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And do I have a motion to read bylaw number 223 for the second time? Councillor Demota? Could I have a motion that council read for the second time bylaw number 223, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize the supplementary assessment of improvements for the taxation year 2021? In the absence of any hands up, I'll call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. Which I think then takes us to agenda item 7.3, which is the supplementary tax bylaw for first reading. And again, Mr. Given, I won't require you to repeat that. Councillor McGrath.
Just a small minor detail for the sake of the minute taker. That was 233, not 223.
Thank you for that. Second time I misspoke on the same number. Might I have a motion then to give first reading to bylaw number 234? That's a number I can remember. Councillor Keller-Harampy, thank you. I have then a motion from Councillor Keller-Harampy that council read for the first time bylaw number 234, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize the imposition of a supplementary tax for the taxation year 2021. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And may I have a motion, please, from someone for second reading of that bylaw?
Would this be for 2234? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now 2, 2, 3, 4.
For 234, second reading. And I think it was Councillor McGrath whose hand I saw. So I have a motion that council read for the second time bylaw number 234, being a bylaw of the Specialized Municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta to authorize the imposition of a supplementary tax for the taxation year 2021. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So those two bylaws will be back for third reading after certification by Parks Canada. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 8 and 8.1, a request for decision with respect to paid parking in the municipality. And Mr. Given, through you to whomever you choose to delegate, I leave that to you for presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Council has previously seen this item. It was at Council for notice December 15th, was discussed on January 15th, and it is here for decision today. So I will be brief in my introductory comments and leave it for council discussion and debate. But as council knows, the consideration of paid parking has been a discussion in the community for a significant number of years. Administration has brought forward a recommendation that council provide direction to administration to implement a paid parking pilot project in the 2021 budget year, and that council further direct administration to present a project plan and a public engagement plan prior to implementing the paid parking pilot project. That's a lot of P's, and it is also fun to say. But I will observe that later on in the agenda, there is at least one item of correspondence with an opinion from a resident on the subject, and I'm aware that council has received other correspondence that would be provided at future council meetings, but council, I think, is aware of that correspondence and discussion in the community. Just to speak to administration's general intent here, receiving this direction from council will allow administration to consider how paid parking will impact the 2021 budget, and will assist us in the preparation of the 2021 budget, which we need to get to council. So this does provide one of those markers, I guess, that will allow us to further develop the budget and refine it before presentation to council. And understanding the number of stakeholders that are likely to be impacted by the proposed change of paid parking, the concept of a pilot project is intentional in that it would give administration and council an opportunity to work with the community, including affected businesses, residents, and other stakeholders on the best way to move forward with paid parking. So just to give council some assurance that administration is aware of the concerns about overflow into residential areas, impact on closely neighboring businesses, and the impact on our visitors, along with council's priority on establishing fiscal equity and ensuring that visitors are carrying their fair share load of the cost of services in the municipality. So the recommendation in front of you attempts to find a way to match up all those different priorities and recognize that council has a couple of different imperatives moving forward to establish fiscal equity and reduce the burden on the tax base, while engaging the public in issues that have the potential to impact them. So, I will leave it there. If you have questions of a technical nature about the process, happy to answer them with the support of the rest of the administrative team.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Questions of council with respect to the request for decision? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Givens. I'm really happy to hear, to observe the points you raised with respect to how this will be rolled out. I think it's important to emphasize that the point of putting together a pilot project is exactly so that we can adjust as we go on. We're unlikely to get this exactly right the first time. I really only have one question, that is around the order that we will be rolling out these two important pieces, the project plan and the public engagement. I'm just wondering how you foresee the project plan, which I would take to be the bones of what a pilot project would look like. How do you see that being brought out? And do you see that being brought out before we undertake the formal public engagement, or concurrent with, or following public engagement? What is the anticipated order there?
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Butler. Yes, we would see them happening concurrently. Obviously, they're interrelated. We would not want to develop a project plan that had a specific direction without the input of the public. And at the same time, stakeholders will need to at least see some draft concept of what the project could look like, or alternatives. And so there will be somewhat of concurrent processes. It wouldn't be meaningful input if the decision had already been made and the implementation plan was already developed. At the same time, the public can't meaningfully engage if they don't see what alternatives are available and possible. And so there will be concurrent processes. We will bring forward a recommended timeline for both so that council can see those. Likely that would be for information and to ensure that council has some input into that process, but we would see them as moving concurrently.
Thank you. If I could just follow up, I'm happy to hear that. I'm very pleased with what I take to be the process that we can foresee for the next few weeks on this. Thank you.
Anything else from council? Mr. Given, to you, through you, to anyone on administration who might be able to respond. You mentioned that there is one piece of correspondence on today's agenda. There have been a few others received, but after this agenda was published, and I anticipate that over time there will be more. And I'm just inquiring whether there might be a plan within administration to collect all of that and present it at one time rather than piecemeal. It just seems to me that if we get a letter a week, they become sort of lost in the shuffle, and it would be, I think, advantageous to collect everything and publish it all at once. I leave that to administration, but I am sensitive to the fact that this will take some time to roll out. And it seems sensible to me that all of the input we receive from the public ought to be compiled and presented as a unit, if that's possible.
Sure. Your worship, thank you for that observation and suggestion. Yes, administration will take that suggestion, and we'll look to incorporate the collection of that public input and presentation to council all in one form as a part of the engagement plan.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Janot, I think I saw your hand.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This is a bit of a sideline comment. When we implement this, we're going to require some signage. And I would like to keep in mind, have administration keep in mind that signage will, last year we tried to reduce we did reduce the speed limit downtown in the same area that we're going to implement parking to 30 kilometers an hour. However, in my opinion, the signage was inadequate. And I know it's hard to get signage 100%, but it's, you can get it more right than more wrong. And I think in this case, we didn't do as good a job as we might have. So seeing as two items are going to apply to the kind of the same area, I think that when we order signage, we should try and get it right. Keep those in mind that the signage, yes, for the speed limit might be only seasonal parking differently, but basically it's a signage to warn the public that we have up ahead, A, paid parking, and B, reduced speed zones. I think that it's important to get that right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Janot. Councillor McGrath, did I see your hand earlier? Sorry, it appears my screen was frozen. I may have missed some things. Councillor McGrath, had I seen your hand earlier?
No, you did not, Mayor Ireland.
All right. Thank you. If there are no other questions for administration, then might I have a motion from a councillor? Councillor Wilson? Your motion, I take it then, would be that council direct administration to implement a paid parking pilot project in the 2021 budget year, and that council direct administration to present a project plan and public engagement plan prior to implementing the pilot project.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Your motion, thank you. Any debate on that motion? All right, I will call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And we could, I suppose, call that a positive paid parking pilot project pronouncement. Agenda item 8.2, a request for decision regarding municipal elections 2021. First, that comes with a waiver of notice. Mr. Given, through you to any member of administration, could you speak first briefly to the request to waive notice?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I will briefly, and again, supported by Ms. Nadon. Council has seen this last week. As Council knows, there were recent changes to the Local Authorities Election Act, which I guess, gave an earlier start to the election season for municipal governments. The timelines to actually receive nomination forms started January 1st. The municipality of Jasper was compliant with that and has enabled interested residents to submit their nomination form to run in municipal election. But at the time, administration hadn't yet done the formal appointment of a returning officer. So this is an intent to ensure that we do identify those staff members who will act as returning officer and substitute returning officer for the upcoming municipal election as required by legislation. And that will also enable us to ensure that those staff are appropriately trained to conduct the duties of the returning officer and ultimately conduct the municipal election. This is a process that is underway now, and that's why administration is requesting the waiver of notice.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Assuming there are no questions on that, might I have a councillor indicate they will make that motion? Councillor McGrath, thank you. I have a motion then from Councillor McGrath that council waive the otherwise required notice in order to make a decision on the returning officer and substitute returning officer at today's meeting for the 2021 municipal election. On the waiver alone, all in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And any comments or discussions about the substantive motion? If not, might I have someone signify that they are prepared to make that motion? Councillor Wilson, thank you. I have then a motion from Councillor Wilson that council appoint Christine Nadon as returning officer for the 2021 municipal election, and that council appoint Caleb Byrne as substitute returning officer for the 2021 municipal election. I'll call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. Agenda item 8.3, request for firstly, waiver of notice and then a request for decision regarding a capital project for asbestos removal in the activity center. And Mr. Given to you, through you to perhaps Mrs. McNabb, I suppose, but whoever wishes to speak to the matter on behalf of administration.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. I will just give a high-level introduction and point Council's attention towards a couple of items that relate to the need for waiver of notice. And then obviously, Ms. McNabb can speak to the operational questions that you may have. This is an item that is presented in the 2021 capital budget. So administration was aware of the need, would have normally progressed, except for the fact that we do not have an approved 2021 budget. So that's why it's here today in front of council rather than coming through a more regularized budget process. But administration was aware of the need. It is would have shown up in the 2021 capital budget, except that we don't have one yet. So this is a consequence of not having that approved at this stage. So that's why it is here today. It is a important matter, as you can see, and we'll hear from Ms. McNabb. The wall does get quite a bit of wear. Administration had intended to conduct some repairs, but on an investigation found that there is asbestos in that wall. And under the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety Act, we as an employer do have a responsibility to mitigate asbestos in the workplace. And so it is here for council's consideration of a more timely nature. The intent here being to effect the repair while the facility is currently under closure so that we wouldn't be in a position to have to seek another closure to do asbestos abatement in the future. It is a rather timely matter. It is here today rather than part of a regular budget process because of the fact that we don't have the established 2021 budget. And finally, I guess I would point out in the financial section, Ms. Natasha has been able to identify that there is some carryover from previous years' projects that came in under budget. And so I suppose a way to consider it is the net new amount that is being requested is not $20,000, The 15,500 is actually carryover. The balance is the only net new dollars required to be able to do this project. I will, if council has any other operational questions or questions about the project, I would refer those to Ms. McNabb.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Questions from councillors? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Before we deal with the question of waiver, I would like to point out that I am not happy to see this coming under request for waiver. I think there has been plenty of opportunity to bring this forward. And I am struggling with what already I see as a considerable number of items coming along without notice. I think council has good reason for implementing notice. We have never had a capital budget passed by this time of year ever in my term on council. So that really isn't an issue. And I just think there are reasons for notice, and I'm not satisfied that waiver is needed here. So I have questions about the project. And I believe time is needed to look into perhaps some of those questions. And that's exactly why I am concerned about waiver, but I'll leave my comments to the question of waiver at the moment. And to point out that I'm not in favor of waiving. No.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor McGrath.
When it comes to asbestos removal, I will absolutely always vote in favor of removing asbestos as soon as possible from any assets in the municipality of Jasper. I have lost a family member due to mesothelioma and understand the severe consequences of contact with asbestos, and I think we should be rid of it as soon as possible. Therefore, I would vote absolutely in favor.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Anything else from councillors on the question of waiver first? Councillor Demoda?
Not on the waiver, no. I think this was an item that I'm happy that came forward. It was brought up at our last Culture and Rec meeting this past Thursday, so I'm glad we're addressing it. I think the issue is important, and it seems like every time we open something up at the activity center or in that building, that we're recovering some form of that. Hopefully, this could be the last of it. If not, I'm going to maybe encourage some further inspection on the building and revisit the inspections that we had earlier on. Couple of years ago. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
My apologies if this might have been covered, but just a question of when the asbestos had been detected. Is it in the immediate past, or has it been a few months?
Your Worship, I'll direct that question to Ms. McNabb.
That would have been detected in, I believe it was November. They were able to come and do the testing for that.
Okay, so Councillor Butler has swayed me. I don't feel the urgency of the waiver of notice, as we have known about the issue for quite some time, and I don't think it's urgent. Well, I don't think there's much of a threat to public health, and I believe we can wait the appropriate time to make a decision.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. Mr. Given, to you or through you to Mrs. McNabb, I appreciate that there is a desire to deal with this issue while the building is closed. Even if we were to have permission to reopen in some respects, it seems to me unlikely that we would be able to accommodate any large group that would require the chairs that are stored in that area anyway, so that it could conceivably remain closed until the work is done. So my question is there a plan in place already for the removal, which is subject to any timelines that should be honored? Or will that unfold after council approves the budget? And that to me affects this question of whether notice ought to be waived. So I would like someone to address that if they could.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. I am at least aware that administration has sought the opinion of a qualified contractor, but I will speak to Ms. McNabb. I don't believe that there have been any arrangements made, but she can speak to the timelines of the project.
So when we had the asbestos tested, they came in, they tested it. They also indicated to us that it was going to take a week to 2 weeks to get approval to remove the asbestos. So there is a time frame that when we actually are able to go forward, we still have to wait in order to get the process done. And that's why I came forward to council sooner than later, because everything has waiting periods to it, which means this project won't be a job that'll be done just in a 2-week period. This will be a waiting period for approval for asbestos, and then getting the asbestos removed, and then getting the gyp rockers in to replace the gyp rock. So there was quite a few steps, and that's why I thought it was best that we get this project going in the event that we get to open our facilities.
Thank you, Mrs. McNabb. Mr. Given?
Your Worship, I appreciate that this predates me, but I would just make the observation that I believe this was a project that was in the 2021 capital budget presentation the council did previously see last year. So while it hasn't been at council for the formal notice period, it is not the first time that council is seeing the project or the need to do this project.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota?
Well, I do appreciate the concept of not being in favor of the waiver, but in this instance, I don't understand what the harm would be in just waiving it now and moving forward with this. It's going to have to be done. And if it's just a matter of process, I don't think that this is a point to be, pardon the term, sticks in the mud over process. Mr. Given has a lot of experience in municipal politics. He's been working with administration. He wouldn't be coming forward with admin to present a waiver if it wasn't the right thing to do right now. So, given that this is the first time that this is coming forward with our new CAO, I want to, give him the benefit of the doubt and the administrative staff that they're doing the right thing. And it wouldn't be here unless they thought it was necessary to move forward with it today. So I'm in favor of waiver. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Keller-Hempy?
It has to be done. So I agree with Councillor Demota and Councillor McGrath. Let's just waive it. It was in the capital budget. We haven't passed the budget. The facilities are closed. I know even if the facilities open, that area can be cordoned off. But I think we just move on and get this job done.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you. I'm sorry to speak again on the same issue. I do object to the sticks in the mud comment. I wouldn't raise this if I didn't think that there was a real concern. Councillors are immediately leaping to the substantive issue and have already concluded that this needs to be done. I don't raise an issue of process just to be a stick in the mud. I raise an issue of process because I think time is needed to determine whether projects need to be done. I have questions around this process. I know those questions will not be able to, or I fear that those questions will not be able to be adequately addressed without some time. So I don't raise this because I I'm stuck on process. I raise it because I think it's an issue that deserves some conversation. It's only $20,000, but council doesn't even know what issues may come up in this conversation because we haven't had the conversation yet. So I'm still not in favor of notice. Thank you.
Anything further from any councillor? On the question of notice, well, we don't even have that the motion before us yet, do we? So might I prevail upon Councillor Journeau? Are you prepared to make the motion?
I am prepared to make a motion to waive notice on this item.
All right. As soon as I find that motion, I have a motion from Councillor Journeau that council waive the otherwise required notice in order to make a decision on a capital project budget for asbestos removal in the multi-purpose hall chair storage room at today's meeting. So that is the motion before us with respect to waiver. If there are no other comments, I will make a brief comment, and that is that I share some concerns expressed by Councillor Butler, but not so much with respect to the waiver, but as to the decision itself. And I am quite prepared to deal with the matter today, but when we deal eventually with the substantive matter, as I expect we will, I am not so sure that I'm prepared to make a decision, although I am prepared to waive notice and have this formally on the table before us. So I will vote in favor of waiver of notice, but that does not mean that I will not speak about process in the context of the substantive issue. Is there anything further with respect to the motion to waive notice? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor of waiver of notice? That is for those opposed. That is carried. So then we are on to the question of whether or not we have a motion. Let's begin with a motion and then the debate. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion that council approve a $20,000 capital project budget for asbestos removal in the multi-purpose hall chair storage room? Councillor McGrath, thank you. So that is the motion, and I open that to debate. All right, well, I signaled that I would speak to the matter, so I will commence. And my concern is this: it's not that we shouldn't consider this and we shouldn't consider it on an urgent basis. I have some concerns about whether we really know how we want to approach this. And it's not that I don't have confidence in staff to understand that, but I don't understand what wall we're talking about, whether it's all walls, some walls, a wall. Is it simply a wall removal? Is $20,000 a reasonable budget? To me, that seems low. Every time we've dealt with asbestos in the past, it has cost us a lot more than we expected going in. And I think council is entitled to know those. I agree that it is a safety issue, a health issue, and I think that should be highlighted more in the request for decision. But I think that council ought to know those things and be comforted to know that administration has turned their mind to them. And secondly, I do have some process issues. It is always a difficult matter, but when we pick and choose items from the capital list and bring them forward and approve them without having approved the overall capital budget, we can easily piecemeal ourselves into problems. And again, this is a small item, relatively speaking, $20,000, but it does speak to a process that is questionable. When we have a list that we haven't approved and then we cherry pick items off the list and advance them and get separate approval when we have not yet considered the capital budget as a whole, and that concerns me. Having said that, I do appreciate urgency. I'm happy to waive notice and get on with this, but I'm not sure that I have all the facts that I need to vote in favor of the substantive motion. So I would prefer to defer it until that information is available. Mr. Given.
Your worship, now that we've dealt with the notice and we are into the substantive matter, as you termed it, administration is here today and prepared to provide that to council directly. Appreciate, council may wish to have seen more detail contained in the request for decision documentation. But certainly administration is prepared with all relevant information here today to answer any questions that council may have about the project scope. And your worship, you specifically asked about, what wall is this and how many walls? And I believe Ms. McNabb is prepared to be able to answer those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Ms. McNabb, I see your hand is up, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, Council. So the walls in question are in the chair storage room, and it is the two side walls, one side wall closest to the stage and then the other wall. That's where the tables and chairs bang into constantly. If you go into that room right now, the whole entire wall is riddled with holes. So we did at one time try and put up an arborite to try and protect the walls, but unfortunately the tables are just that much higher, and so the wall is completely riddled with holes. Plus the arborite did not last and has holes in it itself. With regards to the actual request from Barrow or from the asbestos company, I was mistaken. My response back from the asbestos company with their quote was on December 23rd, 2020, and the quote is for $9,000 to remove the asbestos.
And your worship, but just to speak to the further details, the scope of the project is to, abate the asbestos in an appropriate manner, replace the wall that's in question with wood, a wood wall and regular gyprock that can support the puckboard that administration has reclaimed from the arena improvements to essentially armor the wall so that this wall wouldn't need future repairs. Administration had explored the concept of using that puckboard that Ms. McNabb had squirreled away to utilize, really over top of the damaged wall. But our operations team had a look and recognized that the metal studs would not support the weight of the puckboard. And so it was not possible to glue the puckboard to the existing drywall because it would tear off and expose the asbestos. Similarly, it could not be screwed. Their recommendation was that it could not or should not be screwed to the metal studs, again, because the weight of that puckboard, while great for armoring, meant that it would actually further damage the integrity of the wall and wasn't likely to hold up. So the scope of the project is to remove that wall, do the abatement, install wood framing, regular gyprock, and then the puckboard over top. So that's the full scope of the project.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Any other comments with respect to the substantive matter? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. When samples were taken from that room, I understand that the asbestos is in the drywall mud, the crack filler. I know that's common enough, regrettably, in buildings of a certain age. So my first question is, when samples were taken from the chair room, were there also samples done throughout the building? I'd like to understand how extensive the problem might be throughout the building. I assume those walls were built at the same time as the walls in the remainder of the facility. That's my first question.
Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Butler. No, no other samples were taken at that time, but yes, samples have been taken throughout the building previously. That would have occurred when the asbestos abatement occurred in the arena. So they did go to certain rooms and check to see if there was asbestos to give us a good idea of what we would be looking at down the future. But the problem is only some walls were sampled, not all walls were sampled. Some walls have been replaced and redone. So some are containing, some are not. So we always side on the side of caution and do a sample before we actually do any work on the wall.
Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that was a yes or a no. I know that we have had asbestos issues in the arena, but did we or have we not sampled other walls in the activity center portion of the complex? For example, the hallways in the basement, other areas where we have drywall.
Yes, some other walls in the activity center have been tested.
And have presumably not, you have not found asbestos in those?
No, there's many walls and many doors that still contain asbestos, but as long as you leave it undisturbed, you don't need to remove it. It's when it's disturbed. And that's why this request has come forward, because that wall is completely disturbed.
All right, I understand that. Thank you. Mayor Ireland, I think I have two more questions depending on the answers.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. So that being the case, I think that we can assume that we could see more requests like this coming. And I'm wondering if we have a strategy in that regard. I know that a common approach to handling asbestos in drywall is to cover the drywall, to go over it with another layer, usually fiberglass reinforced panels. I know that the notion has been to use puckboard here, but it is quite common to use FRP panels. And I wonder if that option was looked at, because it is normally a simple question of going over top. And forgive me for delving into operational issues, but I know that is a standard procedure and one which we may well have to look at as that building ages. So was that considered in this case?
Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Butler, I cannot answer that completely, as I don't know what our maintenance department did check into. I provided them with the option of the puck board because we had it, it was free. I don't know if they brought any alternative or looked at any alternative issues other than the gyprocking with the puck board on it. I would have to defer to Mr. Hutton, but I don't think he's on here.
All right, well, I'll leave that for now. And if I may then just ask my third question, and that is, I understand that there's already a contractor for this process. So my question is, was there any form of selection? Was there any tendering? Did we look for competitive quotes on this project?
Mayor Ireland, through to Councillor Butler. The only other removal that we can go to is in the city. So we end up with additional costs going through to the city. So that's why we stick with Barrow State, or have stuck with Hinton as much as we can, so that we're not having the overnight fees and the travel fees and half a day lost on either end for travel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. McNabb and Councillor Butler. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to comment on Councillor Butler's second question in regards to covering the drywall itself. I wouldn't support that plan of attack. I think once we discover asbestos, I think the best case scenario is dealing with it. I don't feel comfortable covering it up for not future generations, but at least future, future years, we're going to have to deal with it at some point. So if we deal with it in stages, I think that's the most prudent way to take care of it. So I would support mitigating it at this point. Although I understand the panels that you're discussing, Councillor Butler, but I wouldn't feel comfortable covering it up at this point now that we've identified it. But and then I guess I wanted to comment on your third. The third question was, Ms. McNabb, I do just want to advise that there are, I know at least of one local contractor that mitigates asbestos as well. So we just don't want to cut him out either. Not to say that he'd be available, but there are options other than just the city. And I guess that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much. I'm just hoping to express my satisfaction with the report as presented by administration, noting that the remaining dollars left over from the multi-purpose hall renovation capital project leaves us with only $4,500 outstanding. So the dollars that are actually going to be allocated to this is $4,500 and not 20 when it's all said and done. I'm really happy to move forward with this. As per OH&S policy, this is not only a public building and a public facility, but this is also a workplace where our workers for the municipality have to go to work every day. It's really important that we do this, and it's really important that we do this in as timely of a manner as possible.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. I have a couple of questions, if I may. While I proceed, if anybody else has a question, please raise your hand and I will happily defer. My questions are these. I take it that it is the damage to the wall that necessitates this. In other words, if it wasn't for the holes, perhaps we wouldn't be worried about this. But if there is asbestos-bearing gyprock on one side of the wall, say the side that faces or adjoins the stage, might we assume that the same gyprock is on the other side of the wall? Might we make the same assumption with respect to the second wall, which, if I understood correctly, is the wall that adjoins the multi-purpose hall near where the climbing wall used to be? And so if we're going to remove asbestos containing gyprock on one side of that wall, do we have an obligation to test the other side and see whether that gyprock ought also to be removed, even though it's not yet damaged? I mean, do we have an obligation? So, as I said earlier, our history tells me that every time we have to dig into this, it keeps expanding. And so even though, yes, it's a $20,000 project now, 15,500 of which can be funded from unused funds, meaning a relatively minor cash shortfall. It just seems to me that once we start, there is a prospect that this is going to grow. And I'd rather deal with all that we have to deal with in this context at the same time and not come back and say, oh, well, once we started tearing out the interior wall of that storage room, we poked a crowbar through the gyprock on the other side. Now we got to do the stage, and on it goes. I would prefer to know the extent of this if we can, and then deal with it globally rather than what I see as a bit of a spot repair when we may have a much larger issue to address. So, Mr. Given, I see your hand up. You or anybody else on administration that can deal with that, I would appreciate it.
Sure, Your Worship. I appreciate the concern, and I think administration's desire would be to do a much more global repair and maintenance process that would be more comprehensive. Appreciating the financial situation of the municipality and the discussion last fall at budget about the financial situation that the community finds itself in, and council's challenge around capital budget. I think we have to appreciate that that context is there. And I think everybody, administration and council and the community, would prefer a comprehensive review and renovation to the facility. I don't think that's in question. Administration would agree with you there, Your Worship. Just in terms of the scope of this particular project, I will say that the intended scope, as I understand it from Ms. McNabb, is to fully remove the wall, including the framing, which would necessitate both sides of gyprock coming out. So if you wanted to think of a room that has 4 walls, each of those walls having 2 sides, we are removing one wall, both sides. And so this wall will be completely dealt with. There still remain 3 other walls of that 4-walled room, each having 2 surfaces, and we are not dealing with those because they are not the ones where we are currently, where the asbestos is being disturbed. So there is not a need to mitigate the asbestos risk there.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you for that, Mr. Given. I had one further question, but I see Councillor Demota, so I can come back to my question. Go ahead, Councillor Demota.
No, that's fine. If it's along the same lines, I just had a comment on our discussion overall.
All right, I just had a specific question then with respect to the background information that was provided. And it indicates that a work order was submitted in 2020 to repair the wall. So that's before the asbestos was discovered. The matter was going to be repaired, the damage to the wall. And I take it that that was not a capital project. I don't recall whether it was or not, but there was a work order. It was going to be processed. Council was not involved. Is a capital budget request required if this is maintenance work? The scope, I agree, has changed a little bit, but it looks to me like administration was proceeding with repairs and had a work order for that purpose. And it turned out to be a little different than they expected. And now it becomes a capital project. Why is that? Why is this not a maintenance operational issue?
Thanks, Your Worship. I will actually direct that to Ms. Malchuk. If Natasha could speak to, where the different items fall in terms of budgeting. But I will make the observation that there is a significant difference between our in-house maintenance team coming over and putting on a skim coat of drywall patching, and contrasted with the OH&S requirements for asbestos abatement, and then a full reframing of the wall, 2 sides of gyprock, and then the installation of puckboard. So just to, there, as council's aware, and you're aware, Your Worship, a significant difference there. But in terms of the treatment of the 2 types of projects in the budget, I would defer to Natasha.
Thank you, Mr. Given, through to Your Worship. This is a repair, maintenance, and replacement under a capital project, being that it's part and parcel of a large asset group buildings. And we have been doing it this way so that you can see the additional larger expense. It's not just, 5,000 or whatnot, and having it as a one-off item in a given year and not doing a transfer of reserves to cover it just would change how the budgeting process would work and what we've been doing in the past. So it's just so that council is aware of expenditures that are a bit more in nature, understandably so not huge by all means, but that we are being as open and as possible so that everything is aware of. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Melchuk. Understood. Councillor Demota, I will return to you.
Thank you. Some of my comments have been answered through that line of questioning. I do want to apologize for the terminology that I used earlier. It was just the first words that came to my mind, and I didn't want to accuse anybody of being a certain way. I was more referencing council as a whole by going in a certain direction and holding up the process. And I think that trying to make a commitment to have some faith in administration, I feel that we're getting too far into the weeds with this conversation. And although I appreciate what we've discussed, I think that I would like, this is just personal, in the future with issues like this, I would like to focus more on the governance side of determining things. And if administration comes forward with these types of things, I'm hoping that it's well thought out and gone through their necessary processes for it before it comes to council. And I would just like to get this motion dealt with and move on to bigger things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. If there is nothing else, Councillor McGrath, I think it was your motion, if I can remember back to that. I will allow you the opportunity to close debate if you wish.
Not necessary, Mayor Ireland. I've said all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I will call the question, and that is that council approve a $20,000 capital project budget for asbestos removal in the multi-purpose hall chair storage room. All in favor? Opposed? There is one opposed. That is carried. Thank you all for that. That takes us to agenda item 8.4, appointments to the Regional Assessment Review Board. And who is presenting that?
Your Worship.
You.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. But just a very brief introduction for today. This is here for notice for council. It would be coming forward on February 2nd. Council has a requirement under provincial legislation and as a part of our West Yellowhead Regional Assessment Review Board to appoint a member to that board, as well as to appoint Councillor Butler to the board as well. And so that's the recommendation that you see in front of you is here for notice today and would be coming again at February 2nd.
Thank you for that. Any questions from any councillor with respect to any further information they might require from administration before we make a decision on this at our next regular council meeting? Councillor Butler?
Thank you. I don't really have a question, but just a comment for council. I have been a member of the Assessment Review Board, as council knows, and that has been particularly because council saw fit that it seemed appropriate that one councillor should perhaps be appointed to that board. So I'm happy to stand again. All I have to do is a simple recertification as opposed to the full certification, which is more time consuming and more expensive. So I think it makes sense. The question I might come up with in my mind is, well, what happens at the end of this term? Because then if I was back on council again, I could continue doing that if council considered it to be appropriate as well, or could step away, which I would happily do. But if I am not on council, it would be my intent to fulfill the full 3-year commitment, in which case, however, if future council wanted me to step away to make room for another councillor to sit on the board, then I'd be happy with that. So I have no particular stake in this going one way or the other. It just seemed sort of the easiest way forward at this point, either as a member of council or just as a member of public in future, and would go anyway. So I have no particular stake. It just seems to be a sensible way forward at this time, because we have to either replace me with someone else or reappoint me. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Butler. And I did use this opportunity with this matter on the agenda to take a look at bylaw, and I concur with your observation there. You could simply continue with the appointment beyond the election, no matter the outcome. And there is not a requirement, as I understand our bylaw, that council appoint a councillor to the position. We just need members from the community, and you would fill that in either capacity. So I appreciate your comments on that. Councillor Demota?
Well, I was just going to ask Councillor Butler, through you, Mr. Mayor, to see if for future councils, if it's a worthwhile rotation, if the process of getting certified, going through the certification, and then actually serving on the board, would that be something worthwhile in the sense of kind of building experience and having part of like a councillor's repertoire when it comes to the evolution of your seat, so to speak?
May I?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Councillor Demota. It's a good question. My answer is that yes, I feel like I don't claim necessarily that there is a great deal of value to having a councillor sit on the local review board per se. I think it's indifferent. I don't think a councillor sitting on a local review panel is compromised in any way, but I don't think that having a councillor on the panel brings anything to the assessment review decisions. The process is very clear and very tight. And so whether a person sits on council or doesn't, I think is not really relevant in the hearings. However, I do feel that having gone through the training process, that it brought a great deal of perspective and understanding for me that I think all councillors will realize have from time to time brought into conversations that is really valuable. So having a councillor having obtained the training, I think while not critical is valuable. Particularly, I would add this: we have a regional assessment review board here, which in our region, as we all know, and having a linkage to council there, I think, is really important. There are cases in which we find ourselves struggling with how effective that regional assessment review board is and how to make it effective, which is a question that comes to council. So in that respect, particularly with a regional assessment review board, I think that having a member sitting on council, and when it has been valuable, and when the chairing of the regional assessment review board rotates through the communities, and when Jasper was responsible for chair, assuming that position, then I sat as chair. And it didn't take a lot of work, but I feel like having that linkage to council has been important. And that's why I mentioned that if I were not on the next council, that if that council wanted to appoint a councillor to the board and space, a position was needed to make that happen, then I would cheerfully step away if that seemed to be the right thing to do. So thanks for the question.
Councillor Demota?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. That's precisely a lot of the information that I guess I was looking for, and that sounds good. So thanks for the feedback.
All right, thank you. That disposes for today's purposes with agenda item 8.4. We have an addition to the agenda. It is now 10:50, and I was thinking of calling a recess at 11 anyway, and it seems to me that this might be a more opportune time, as this next discussion could take more than that 10 minutes. So for the comfort of council and all who are attending, I will call a 10-minute recess, and we will reconvene with agenda item 8.5 at 11 o'clock. I'm sorry, Councillor. Well, that's just a thumbs up. Thank you, Councillor Journal. So we stand in recess for 10 minutes. I will call us back to order, and we are at agenda item 8.5, a request to waive notice, and then a request for council consideration of a letter to the Premier and the government And Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thank you, Council, for considering this as an addition on today's agenda. This is something of extreme importance and timely in nature as it's changing each day. Our province's Rocky Mountains, even after yesterday's announcement, are in jeopardy to be irreparably damaged. We Albertans have a duty to act and to protect these lands, the water supply, and the overall future of our province's Rocky Mountains. Our voices are powerful, and the greatest hope for preserving our natural assets for future generations. I hope that the rest of Council can see the value in waiving notice to consider this today for the sake of only writing a letter.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
My request is to waive the necessary 2-week notice otherwise required to hear the matter of the Municipal Council of Jasper writing a letter to our government to explain our discontent with disruption to Alberta mountain ranges.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Might I prevail upon you, Councillor McGrath, to just address what you see as the urgency that suggests that we should waive notice and not consider this as notice and then a letter potentially in 2 weeks' time. So just the urgency of the situation.
I believe the urgency is now, and I believe that the decisions being made by the provincial government on a day-to-day basis have the urgency required to have all Albertans using their voices as timely as possible to have our province go back to the drawing board and encourage reinstating the coal policy.
Thank you for that. Just to allow debate to continue, I will take that then as a motion that we waive the notice otherwise required to consider at today's meeting a decision on writing a letter to the provincial government relating to coal extraction on the eastern slopes. That's your motion? Perfect. Thank you. That motion is before us and open to debate. Councillor McGrath has spoken to it as the mover. Comments from other councillors? I see no hands wishing to speak. So I will call the question being on waiver of notice to consider the matter at today's meeting. Those in favor? Opposed? There is one opposed. That is carried. So we have dispensed with notice. So again, I will call upon you, Councillor McGrath, to present your motion on the substantive matter that you brought forward today.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thank you very much, Council, for hearing agenda item number 8.6. My intention today is to present a motion that Council direct an administration to write to Jason Nixon, the Environmental Minister, the Premier Jason Kenney, and our MLA Martin Long to join the rest of Alberta in expressing our views on the coal policy being reinstated. The expression is potentially noticing, I think the wording can be worked with administration after today's meeting of what exactly we want to have in the letter, and we could share it by email. But what the letter would consist of is noting our intentions of protecting the environment and protecting the Rocky Mountains of Alberta for coal mining. I believe that it's really important for our water supply and the future generations of Albertans to stand up today and to consider writing this letter to the province, in which we can find the appropriate wording at a later time.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Demota.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the conversation, and that's why I didn't vote against the waiver, because I did want to discuss it. I didn't, because I was working yesterday, and I didn't have time to really watch the news or hear what was coming through on this, and I apologize if a lot of the conversation was already in the works provincially, and I wasn't paying attention to it. But now here we're addressing it, and you know, Councillor McGrath, I really appreciate the consideration put behind this. But in order for us to be supportive in writing a collective letter, I think that, you know, some formal discussion amongst council and seeing where we sit as a whole before we you know, write something. I understand the nature and the position of where you're coming from, but I think in order for us to write a letter to the province on behalf of council, I think it's good to be clear on where council as a whole sits on this issue. And I don't have all the information right now, but I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Other comments? Councillor Wilson.
Where to start? I guess it's a pretty challenging topic, and unfortunately, I feel like, you know, the municipality, it's not really our topic to discuss. That being said, I fully support the idea of it. I don't see what kind of clout, you know, we would have besides being municipal representatives of Alberta. It's really difficult to say how we can make a difference by writing a letter. I fully support it. I support the idea, and I've been vocal about it personally. And I'm just currently trying to educate myself as much as possible. So I just, and it's kind of an evolving topic. I wouldn't want to lose out on the opportunity to have some influence, but I'm a little apprehensive using our voice to, like, as a group to lobby the provincial government. I really understand the necessity of some type of movement, but being put on the spot and just leaving it in administration's hands, I think is not ideal. Anyway, I do want to kind of further this conversation, but just, you know, briefly, I wanted to jump in. I'd like to hear from other councillors as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Keller-Grampy.
I've heard some on this topic, and I'm going to be honest, I am not well versed in it. I cannot speak to it. I need to do some research before I'll sign my name or allow my name to be added to a letter. I'd like to see it come back, and in the next week, I'm quite happy to do my own research on this topic.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Grampy. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I'm was extremely disappointed and affronted and opposed to the government's move to rescind the coal policy back in May, and I was very happy to hear yesterday that they have reinstated it, at least in part. I am not in favor of expansion of coal mining, but for me, it's a question of jurisdiction and whose sandbox you play in. I am in the process of writing a letter to Ministers Nixon and Savage to thank them for reversing the decision and encourage that they hold to that position. But it's not an area for Jasper Municipal Council to weigh in. I, as I think council is aware, have quite regularly been of the view that we as municipal council need to stay within municipal boundaries and understand where our jurisdiction and where our responsibilities lie. Our neighbors an hour drive east benefit hugely from coal mining. A coal mine was recently developed there. Would we weigh in on that? We didn't weigh in on the TMX pipeline, which has been a huge economic importance to our community, but some of us may not be happy with the fact that the coal mine is being built. But again, for me, not a question within our bailiwick. So I'm completely in favor of the sentiment, but not at all in favor of the proposed action.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Other comments from councillors? Councillor Juneau?
At first, when I saw that, I thought it was a good idea, but after listening to the comments, especially made by Councillor Butler, yeah, it's not a municipal council position for us. I realize we live in a national park, environmentally sensitive, but it's not our jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Juneau. I am, I think, more inclined to Councillor Keller-Grampe's position. Although I'm following the news to the extent I can, I don't consider myself to be sufficiently versed in the topic. I understand the jurisdictional question, but on the other hand, this is a question of the environment, and surely that concerns the welfare of all Albertans, including those who live in Jasper. I have done some limited research with respect to the impact of selenium in the environment, and I understand what a challenge that can be for those downstream of the mines. But I don't even know for sure what the reversal means as of yesterday and what lands are affected. I would be more inclined to support, if requested, either those municipalities which are affected and would reach out for our support. And I think we could, I would certainly consider doing that. I would certainly consider supporting our provincial organization, AUMA, if it was to take a stand, which then kind of signals that this is a provincial issue more than just a municipal issue. But all of that is unknown to me at this time. And so I would prefer to defer a decision on whether we write a letter until I have better factual support for it. And I think it would be a challenge to direct administration to prepare a letter without giving clear direction about what that letter is supposed to say. Is it objecting in all respects to coal extraction in the province? Is it simply to express that we would like to see a full reinstatement of the, I think it's the 1976 policy? Or is it somewhere in between that we have not yet defined? And I'm not sure that we can ask administration to do that, although we could potentially ask administration to give us a briefing note. But what would be encompassed in that, I'm not sure, and whether administration has time to tackle something that is admittedly at the very fringe of our jurisdiction, if within our jurisdiction at all, when there is so much else going on. Seems to me to be potentially unfair to our administration. So again, as others have said, I agree in principle with the sentiment, but to put it into practice and implement something at this time seems to me too challenging and far too challenging just to leave with administration without really clear direction. So as much as I agree, and I voted in favor of the waiver of notice because there may be some timeliness that really does matter here, but the government seems to have reversed course, but how far and for how long we don't know. Our voice may may help. And every individual councillor is certainly entitled to send a letter, as Councillor Butler indicated he was going to do, as is every citizen. So we can give it some exposure by discussing it at today's meeting. But I am reluctant to vote in favor of the motion at this time and would prefer to at least defer until we have better information rather than to defeat or risk defeating the motion at this time. Councillor Demota?
It's like you said everything I wanted to say and in way better words. So thank you very much. I'm that's the course that I was hoping to take.
Councillor McGrath?
Well, thank you very much to each and every one of you. I appreciate and respect your positions and your sentiments that you've stated. I want to use my voice and use the voices available to do the best that we can do as humans to create a better future for all Albertan children. And I owe it to my children to stand here and to present this in the best way possible to ensure that I've done all I can do to ensure a safe water supply and Rocky Mountains for future generations. I do agree that deferring this motion to a future date would protect it from being defeated today, and I appreciate that, Mayor Ireland. But regardless of the direction this takes, my intention is to give it my all, regardless of what that takes.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. I'm trying to read in my mind the procedural bylaw. We could, at your request, Councillor McGrath, defer to the next regular meeting with or without direction to administration to come back with more. Rather than direct administration, we could all undertake whatever research we consider to be appropriate and keep it away from administration just as an added burden to them. And that would be suitable for me. So alternatively, we did waive notice, so it could come back at any time. And if you wanted to simply withdraw your motion and reintroduce it at a later time, that too, I think, is acceptable under our procedural bylaw. So I leave it to you whether you wish to simply defer calling the question till a later date or withdraw and reintroduce with notice having been addressed already.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I would prefer to defer to February 2nd's regular meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I won't call for a vote on that, but unless there is any councillor who wishes to signify their objection to that, we can defer and come back to this in 2 weeks' time, and we'll consider then whether we have any different information that might persuade councillors otherwise. That then addresses agenda items 8.5 and 8.6. Agenda item 9 is the one letter we have received so far, at least received in time to make it onto this week's agenda. And that is for consideration in the evolving context of the paid parking pilot project. Which takes us to other new business. And again, Councillor McGrath, you had indicated that you wish to address outdoor skating, which has been added as agenda item 10.1 to today's agenda. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. This new business is brought both by community conversations information from the fall. It comes back to sentiments that I tried to share on November 3rd's meeting, discussing recreational opportunities for the community of Jasper. And I understand that the likelihood of this happening in this year is very unlikely, but I think that our residents would really appreciate a conversation at the council level to understand what options are available for outdoor skating in Jasper. There's a lot of momentum behind it, specifically within the town site. We have beautiful lakes to skate on that are amazing, and we're so fortunate to have them. However, it's not accessible to all families without vehicles, and there's a specific interest in children being able to access the rink on their own without parents driving them to the ice surface. So I don't necessarily need an answer today for sure. I would just like to start the conversation so that it's on the table and that our residents see that it's being discussed at this level for future years of consideration.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
My apologies. Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Demota.
Thank you. I'm glad that Councillor McGrath brought this up. It was actually going to be part of my my council committee review. I attended our last Culture and Rec meeting, which I'm a rep on. I'm the council rep on. This discussion did come up because it has been quite a prominent discussion in the community and on social media. And there are other communities that have taken some initiatives. Mr. Bridge had brought forward some information on portable rinks and how those may be applied in the community. And there were some board members that had some ideas of locations and possibility of it being a somewhat to aid tourism. And there are also questions on the benefit for community health and maybe the future opportunity of expanding from one to another. And the reason I say that is because Mr. Bridge, through some of his, recent findings, is there are portable systems out there right now that are quite affordable, and they come in various sizes. And I think many people have had a little bit more exposure to the concept of these because of maybe watching hockey and some of the initiatives Canadian Tire is doing for smaller communities. And I think that there might be an opportunity down the road and recognize at the Culture and Rec Board level that it may be a little too late to be going down the road and even considering budget considerations for this. Mr. Bridge said that right now that there's some quality affordable setups that are in the $100,000 mark, and I think maybe through some fundraising initiatives or maybe there could be other areas where we can contemplate funding this. But I'm liking that it's coming grassroots, and we have an opportunity to discuss this. It's too bad that I appreciate the foresight that Councillor McGrath had in November, and I wish that we had a little bit more of an understanding of what was out there, because I probably would have been pushing this a lot earlier than later. So I do appreciate bringing Councillor McGrath bringing that forward.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor Juneau.
Well, I don't think it has to be that complicated. And just when you talk about grassroots, Councillor Demota, I think banging some boards together and getting the fire hose out there could almost be a solution. I know that there are some insurance insurance necessities, as it's a municipal asset, but honestly, a portable rink for $100,000, I don't think so. I think that knock some boards together and get it going. Like we've got quite a long winter ahead of us, and I don't suggest that we need to push something like this ahead. I think we administration to kind of come up with a few ideas and maybe bring them to us the next committee of the whole meeting. Mr. Given, have you looked into outdoor rinks at all, or do you have any experience with outdoor rinks? And I know most communities in Alberta at least have one or two that are pretty bare bones, and I would hope that we could kind of slap something together.
Sure, Your Worship, to Councillor Wilson's question, yeah, I'm interested in the discussion. I obviously am not informed on the full nature of the discussion here, but my experience has been that I've never seen a portable neighborhood rink. I have seen many rinks of different sizes at a neighborhood scale that are essentially, some 2x6s together on a flat surface, filled, as Councillor Wilson said, either by neighbors with the support of the municipality, to larger installations that have permanent boards. And, so, my last community, that was the experience. There were some regular fixed installations that were quite permanent in nature, but not with any sort of cooling system. Maybe a slab, and then that slab used for, road hockey during the summer, and ice hockey in the winter, down to neighborhood scale installations that are essentially a square surface using a 2x6 sort of side system to hold snow and ice in together, which is compacted, the snow compacted and then watered down. So a very traditional Canadian low impact sort of approach is what I, had seen. There may be additional information from other members of administration that I'm not aware of at this point. But I would say that if there was a desire of council for administration to present some information or alternatives or options to move forward, in 2021, that's certainly something that would be possible for us to bring forward some options for council's consideration.
Councillor Journal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is an item that's very dear to me. But again, the way we're discussing it, it's not going to go anywhere. We're already trying to make it too big. Councillor McGrath brought up the subject of a skating surface. And that's where we should start, a skating surface. Let it evolve thereafter. But already we're talking about boards, and it's going to be hockey. Well, hockey is not skating. Councillor McGrath brought forward a project for a skating surface, and that's what we should concentrate on. It's low cost, low budget, and allow it to develop, move into a pilot project or wherever. Locations will always be a problem, will always be argued. And don't kid yourself. Outdoor rinks are not easy to maintain. We've heard from our previous CAO where they put in outdoor rinks, and Prince George expected volunteers to do the flooding. Yeah, it was good for about 3 weeks. After that, they went nowhere. We've heard about the town of Lacombe, the same thing. Let's just start with a small project, a little surface, let's say maybe 50 by 80, somewhere's across from the little park across from where our town hall is, and start there. It'd be central, be the place where most kids can walk to. It's simple, but let's start simple and let it grow. Let's, talking about portable boards or tourism and so on and so forth. Sorry, we've talked about this for 30 years. It's gone nowhere. So let's start with a small surface, see where it goes. This is a good year to be thinking about it because our facilities are closed, and in other communities and people's own backyards, they're very popular. So let's get one done.
Thank you, Councillor Journal. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to know where Scott's hiding this groundhog of his, and how he knows that it's going to be a long winter going forward. We still have 2 weeks before we officially find out. So I don't know. I'm just having fun with that one. And for clarification, the information that Mr. Bridge brought forward wasn't for a portable hockey rink. It was for a portable skating surface, and that involves refrigeration and generators or having access to power. So that's that $100,000 that I was talking about, and it was just for a skating surface, no boards, and portable meaning that you can put it up somewhere and then it's there for the season or for a while, and then you move it. It's not a matter of like tearing it down midwinter. Portable meaning that it could be set up somewhere, torn down in the spring or wherever it is, and put up somewhere else. I was concerned when the discussion of fundraising for it came up, because I I let the rest of the board members know that, you know, there's a little bit of momentum that started with the skate park. And I'd hate to take away from that, you know, going in the direction that we've been going so far, and then having that conversation at the table. And, you know, it was presented that if other areas for the skate park were considered, you know, as in Ball Diamond A, which was thrown out there, that the existing area of where the skate park is now has a flat concrete surface, and that could pose as a local outdoor skating surface for community members and or anybody else that want to participate in. But it's closer, more close to the residential area. So that is an opportunity down the road if things change with the skate park location. So I'm just throwing out there. I don't want to throw other wrenches into the works, but those were the things that were discussed, and I was going to cover in my report later anyway. So that's already been done here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeVota. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much for all of that from each of you. I think that this is a really meaningful conversation, and this is a conversation that the residents of Jasper would be really happy to hear that we're having. I wonder if there's a consensus among councillors without coming to a motion to see if we could be presented with options for a possible pilot project of some sorts, looking into some options, some locations, possible costs. Also, I think administration working together to pull in community development. There's some healthy communities dollars available for a project such as this, and it's been brought to my attention that possibly in the range of $5,000 to $7,000 a nice surface package is possibly available. So it seems that there is quite a bit of interest in among us to possibly have some very low-key presentation of small options that would be available.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Perhaps I might change the wording a bit and suggest high key but low cost. Give it all the exposure we can, because I agree that it would be a nice adjunct to our community, particularly this year, but in future years as well. But something low cost and relatively immediate. This doesn't have to be anything elaborate or fancy. At least a generation ago, just about every parent had a experience building a backyard rink. I think there must still be some of those around that can help us out. And unless I hear objection, would that direction be enough for you, Mr. Given, to circulate within administration the notion of coming up with some ideas, principally for a location? And we have discussed this before, and my understanding was that underground irrigation is a bit of a concern, and the damage that might happen with a surface ice configuration. But whatever challenges administration might see, if you come back with something and council could consider options from there. I don't see any objection, but I'm willing to entertain any further comments. Revising that informal direction to you, but in the absence of that, is that sufficient for you to come back with something?
Sure, I'll maybe just confirm what I think I've heard council say, and what I would imagine is the action flowing from that, so that council can confirm that I've heard you correctly. You're looking for low cost, but high profile and easily accessible outdoor skating options that could be possible to implement in the 2021 year, this winter season, let's say it that way. And I guess the action that I would propose would be that we would return to committee, council committee of the whole, with a report that provided council some options that would meet that criteria. If that was the action that flowed from this discussion, is that what council is imagining? I'm seeing some level of concurrence, and of course, you know, any actual decision point would flow through the normal process. But in terms of providing administration, requesting administration look into an issue, That's what I've heard, and that's what I propose that we would do out of this discussion.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just a little further to that, I have had some discussion with some volunteer members of the fire brigade, and they have looked into it to a certain point. I'm sure that they'd be able to assist in some type of flooding or with access to water, etc., and volunteer man hours, maybe. But I just wanted to put that out there as well. That might be prudent to chat with them as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, just anecdotally, the term hoser, the Canadian expression hoser, came from the concept of the losing team of playing hockey on these types of surfaces. It was their duty to flood the ice. So if you lost your little game of pickup or whatever it was your job to flood the ice. And so grab the hose and flood the ice, and that's where the term hoser came from, in case people didn't know that.
Thank you for that vignette on Canadianism. I did not know that, not being a hoser. All right, thank you, Councillor McGrath. That resolves, I think, agenda item 10.1. Is there any other new business for council? I have one brief matter. It does not require, I think, any discussion or much discussion, but it occurred to me during our discussions on agenda item 8.2, the municipal elections. On the occasion of the last election, administration put together a package for prospective candidates. I think it was called "So You Want to Be a Councillor," something like that. And it was just a package that included relevant legislation and topical matters before council, things of that nature. There must be some slight budget impact to that, but since we are preparing for an election in the fall, I just wanted to put it out that I think that was a well-received initiative on behalf of the municipality for candidates at the last election. And it might be something that we would want to repeat. And if there is a need for a budget, I am just alerting administration now that that is something that I would be happy to see in the budget when it finally gets presented to us. Go ahead, Mr. Given.
Well, Your Worship, I'll just interject to say, full credit to Ms. Nadon and her team. On the municipal website, there is already a candidate's handbook that has been produced by the municipality of Jasper. So they, Christine and Kayla, have done a fantastic job of putting that together. It is currently available. And with respect to budget, in the report under the financial information, you'll see that administration had been setting aside a reserve to conduct the municipal election. That reserve appears to have an adequate amount to conduct the election. And I believe that the majority of other communication costs will be able to be included in the amounts that we already have. So I don't believe that there's a requirement at this time for additional amounts towards the 2021 municipal election. And Christine and her team have obviously been are on the ball and have done a fantastic job of preparing the information that prospective candidates will need.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you then to them. While I was cruising the website looking for recycling information, I wasn't looking for election information, and don't read anything into that, but there you have it. All right, thank you for that. Is there any other new business for council? All right, if not, upcoming events, nothing is listed. We are still in a time of COVID restrictions, which may be changing in a week or so, but we will see. And then we'll get back to having a more fulsome list. Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped over councillor reports. Agenda item 11. Are there any reports? Councillor McGrath.
Last week, I attended a Jasper Municipal Library Board meeting. Tomorrow, I will attend the community conversation, and I will miss the Jasper Community Team Society meeting this Thursday.
Thank you. Anything else? I was going to mention, I think a week ago or Thursday of last week, Councillor McGrath and I attended a meeting of the Inclusion Committee, which is a committee that is not reflected on the attachment to the agenda for boards and committees. So it was a bit of an odd one, but I just mentioned that there is another committee with assigned councillors that is not revealed in that document, just for interest. And if there are any others that occur to councillors, please let me know about that. Upcoming events, there are none, which takes us to the other matter added to today's agenda that I subscribed, the number 12A, which is a request from Councillor Butler to move in camera to discuss a personnel or human resources issue. So if I might have a motion, perhaps I could ask Councillor Butler for that motion to have council move in camera at 11:42 a.m.
Thank you. I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Now